I'm Carole Owens, and this is Stockbridge Updates. You know, for a long time now, since last summer, we've been debating about whether or not we can turn rallies into a movement. How do you translate folks getting out in the street with signs into an actual political movement? And a lot of people thought those rallies were cute, but they weren't going to be effective. Well, folks, we did it. And do you know how I know? Because on November 4th, this country told us so. Talk about a blue wave. You know, the part that isn't funny is it's been like almost a decade of abuse, challenging the worth of our institutions, of our very Constitution, of the way we've conducted ourselves, mistaking empathy and sympathy and generosity for others as weakness, mistaking bullying as strength. Many of you know I'm a clinician, I'm a doctor, and my field is psychology. And there really is a very simple answer to abuse. It's just one word. It's when you say enough. And on November 4th, I hope, we all got together, went to the polls, and said enough. Now, I am thrilled to welcome a woman who has been called a force of nature, and I'm not going to argue. Liana Toscanini is the director of the nonprofit center of the Berkshires, and she has really become a centerpiece for our nonprofit world. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I love nothing better than to discuss these type of things with other forces of nature in our community.
Well, you're so sweet. And you know, I'm so glad you're here because I always wanted to ask you, how did you think this idea up?
Well, it wasn't so difficult. I moved here from New York. And I became involved in my little town because it was the first time, my town of Sandusfield, that I could. When I was in New York City, I was working all the time. There was no time to volunteer. And so I became involved, and I learned how to write grants. And I was, the treasurer of the Historical Society and the chair of the Sandusfield Arts Center board and miscellaneous Friends of Yanner Park. And eventually, word sort of got out that if you asked me for help with a press release or a grant or something, that I never said no. And so one day in 2015, there was this 2-week period where no matter what grocery store I was in, Price Chopper, Big Y, Guido's, wherever I was, people were cornering me in the produce aisle saying, and literally grabbing my arm and saying, you have to help me. And it was either getting the word out about something or help with writing a grant or strategizing fundraising, whatever it is. They were all ladies of a certain age who had my name and were asking for help. And I thought, wow, this has to be a full-time job. And so I thought, well, I should do this full-time because obviously there's a need. And so I thought, well, the state should pay for this. I should be a community navigator of some kind, and the state should pay for it. And I remember the first person I met with was our state rep, Smitty Pignatelli. Yeah. And he kind of got a chuckle out of the whole idea. But we sort of talked business planning and all this other stuff, and he basically said that money's not forthcoming right now. I've just been through all these budget sessions, and that's not going to happen. So then I met with about 50 other people, just getting their input, and it was at the time Jennifer Daly, who was the head of Berkshire Taconic Community Foundation, exactly. All kinds of people. All up and down the spectrum, business leaders, nonprofit leaders, friends, anyone who was in the most remote way entrepreneurial. And so over Christmas vacation in December of 2015, I sort of crafted a little business plan, which of course didn't work out exactly as I had planned. But I always love to tell this story that years later, after the Nonprofit Center of the Berkshires had been around for a while, State Rep Smitty Pignatelli was the one to get us an earmark. And so the original wish, like, can you find me $50,000 so I can do this full time, actually came true. And so, it took a while to prove ourselves. But that was the birth of the Nonprofit Center of the Berkshires was simply an incredible 2 weeks where 7 or 8 people were asking me for help. And I thought, there has to be a better way to do this. And so I had been with Community Access to the Arts for years and years and years, 5 years on the board, 9 years on staff. And I sadly said goodbye to them. What was so great about CATA was I had watched them grow for 14 years. And they are a model organization, as you know. And I learned a lot from that, which has served me very well in this role as founder and executive director.
The first executive director of CATA is a neighbor of mine, and I deeply respect her, and I'm in love with her dog. No, this is a community of dogs. And she has one of the nicest, Dolly and cutest. But I want to ask you, you came from perceiving a need to turning into a very well-organized nonprofit. Let's call it a nonprofit support organization.
Correct.
Okay. And how long was that process? So you talked about when Smitty got you an earmark. How long from standing at the meat counter to Smitty and the earmark?
That was probably about 6 years. So, the first few years you're a startup and you're scrappy and you're using volunteer work. You're not getting paid. You are figuring it out as you go along. And because I've always been pretty entrepreneurial, I had the nonprofit experience, and I knew you couldn't just rely on one revenue stream. And so all this time I've been developing multiple revenue streams. So nonprofits actually pay for things like workshops and, membership. We also have donations. We also get grants. There's the earmark. And, we're in a little bit of an interesting position because we're a support organization for other nonprofits. We don't really want to compete against those nonprofits for the same donors. But there are donors, let's face it, who are large enough, like a Berkshire Bank, for example, which has a big footprint, to fund pretty much everyone. And they do. Berkshire Bank was the first funder to fund us. And I think, it took probably 4 or 5 years before people really started signing on. A lot of corporate sponsorship, because we have 2 core programs that just speak to sponsors in terms of recognition for their own marketing efforts, and also they can see so clearly what a benefit these things are to the community. One is the Giving Guide, and the other is the Berkshire Nonprofit Awards.
Yep, I want to stop before you go to that. You hit on something very, very important. You're a support group. You've organized because you realize that just because an organization is excellent at providing a service doesn't mean that they're any good at all in generating funds. So you come into the situation helping to generate funds, but then if you want funds for your organization, how do you avoid being a competitor? And before you move on to the excellent programs that is part of NCB, I want to talk a minute about how you walk that line. Now, you said one thing, and one thing is there are donors who have lots of money, and they can give to many different organizations, so you're not taking away from someone else. But there's more than that.
Yes. I would say membership is a lovely source of revenue, but it's only 10% of our budget. But it's an important amount of money. The more money we raise, the more free programs we can do. And nonprofits love free programs, and it's important to have everything be very modestly priced. We have fans. We have people who have discovered what we do and understood it, and wanted to get behind it. So I might not have sought them out. They might have sought us out. And those fans are very supportive. We are very lucky this past year to receive funding from the Barr Foundation in Boston, which is a very large foundation and has been supporting arts organizations here for many years. But they have this little thing they do on the side, which is supporting support organizations. Yeah. And almost no one does that. But they have a small pool of funds for infrastructure and support organizations, and they are seemingly fascinated with the concept, as is, by the way, Mackenzie Scott, who, there are few people, big philanthropists who understand the importance of a connector organization, a support organization for other nonprofits. And I think the Berkshires now gets it too. In the beginning, there was a lot of skepticism. Like, why would you start a nonprofit to support other nonprofits? The ridiculousness of that idea, right, resonated with some people. And slowly, after, we now have over 20 programs, people get it now.
So let's talk about what you actually were offering by way of support. So it breaks down into certain initiatives, and if you would share what those are. And I know you said to me privately that some are better known than others. So let's start with the initiatives of NCB that are less well known, so we can plug them here.
Okay. Well, so I like to group what we offer according to our tagline, which is, we help nonprofits connect, learn, and grow. And everything fits neatly into those three categories. So the connecting, most members of the community are not at our networking events because they are specifically for nonprofit leaders to connect with each other. These folks never get away from their desks. So collaborations happen when people are in the same room. We also connect in workshops. Sometimes we have to tell the nonprofit folks waiting for the teacher to speak to stop talking so that the teacher can speak, because they're having such a good time catching up with each other, sharing information, and possibly forming collaborations and connections. So there are a lot of ways that we connect nonprofits, not only to each other, but also to the community. That could be a volunteer fair, and community members do know about volunteer fairs because they show up. We haven't done one in a while. It's been very difficult since COVID. Attendance was nothing during COVID. Then it's taken many years to come back.
So let's talk a minute about goals. So connect, educate. All right. So what is the goal? How many programs would you say that you provide are under the category Connect? And what is your goal?
So my goal really comes from a place of empathy, I think, from having helped so many small nonprofits. I am very tuned into what the needs are, and my goal is to make their lives easier. The people that are founding nonprofits, running nonprofits, trying to grow nonprofits, have a charitable mission. Executive directors have to do many things. They have to do marketing. They have to do fundraising. This has nothing to do with the program, the reason they started the whole organization. So I feel for them because they have to balance a lot of balls in the air, and they aren't necessarily schooled in all the things like PR, like you are. So, we try to make life a little easier for them. And that could be any number of things. It could just be a directory of funders, so they don't have to look up, how many possible grants can we write this year? Or the resource directory, which is the little book I gave you today. There are over 600 businesses in there that specifically serve nonprofits. And it could be just someone who is a bookkeeper, an independent consultant, all the way up to someone who does web design, someone who does social media, accountants, lawyers. All these folks in this resource directory are specifically want to serve nonprofits, along with other businesses as well. So that book, apparently it's our most used thing that we do because it saves people a lot of time. Instead of Googling around the internet and spending half an hour looking for a venue for your next gala, you can go to the venue section and see what all your options are around the county. So it's about saving people time, providing programs and services for them in areas where they're not very well educated, because they need to know all those things. And then the camaraderie. I mean, getting people together to support each other. It's a tough business. Nonprofit leadership is not for the faint of heart, in my opinion. You have to be a real crazy person to juggle all those things and try to make something move forward with very little funding and very little support. So, I'm just trying to make their lives easier. So everything is based on that.
Yeah, that's exactly how it sounds. It sounds as if you put yourself in their position and said, gosh, what would I want? And then the second piece is, I know, workshops. And I'm wondering how you pick the topics for the workshops. Do you sort of survey your members, your users, or how does it come to be?
So I think there's several ways. We certainly listen to our constituents, and when they say we really need a treasurer training, it's in the back of my head, okay, I have to think about this. Who do I know who could do this? A lot of emails come across my desk from other organizations doing trainings, probably national and regional, Massachusetts wide. And I see the topics and I think, oh, that one looks good for our region. I'm going to see if that person will come here. And then, I take workshops myself to continue my education. And if they're really good, I'm immediately emailing that teacher to say, hey, we need this in the Berkshires for sure. And so that's exactly what happened pretty recently. A year ago, I took a fundraising workshop called Asking Without Anxiety, because honestly, I don't really spend a lot of time fundraising because I have so many other things to do, and it's not my professional background. So I thought, well, I need to grow. I need staff. Staff requires money. I need to learn how to really do it. And so it was a great class. And I went out and I raised over $100,000 afterwards.
Good for you.
Yeah. And I thought, well, if I can do it, someone who's, not really enchanted with that particular profession, then other people can do it too. And we invited this gal who's on the circuit. She's a circuit speaker, meaning she's not inexpensive, but we got the money together to get her here. And we just did a workshop at the Red Lion Inn, which is our favorite place to do workshops, in the Hitchcock room.
Hitchcock room.
Yes.
Sure.
And so people walked down that, and many people had never been there. So, you know, it was great fun. And it's an attraction of itself. And we had 25, 30 people take this workshop just this past fall, and they loved it. They couldn't say enough good things about it. And it was all types of organizations, big and small, all types of people, development directors, executive directors, volunteers. So that was kind of great. So it comes, the topics come from a wide survey of interests. We do, you know, surveys are pretty quick way to get some information, and you can see the topics that rise to the top. It's always about fundraising and board governance. Always. Those are the top two things. And other things are interesting too. Cybersecurity, using AI in grant writing. There's all kinds of fascinating topics that you can share. We even had a webinar on faith-based fundraising. Really interesting.
Right. And more elements get brought in as we change as a country, as we progress, as our technology changes. I mean, I wrote my first grant 60 years ago.
Wow. I bet you're really good at it.
I'm pretty good at it.
Yes, writers have an edge.
Yeah, but there's another thing too, and that is I love that you had something where it said fundraising without anxiety. So much has to do with the attitude toward the task. And I was so young and I guess idealistic when I first got into that piece of the field, that I didn't know to be anxious. And I didn't know anything to worry about. I just, this is what I want to do and this is how much it costs. And
well, imagine if you're the person reading all those grants, right? They can be very dry and boring, depending on how you structure the application. But they love someone who can write and tell stories to make their lives. I mean, if you're reading 100 grants, honestly, the ones that float to the top are the ones that are well written. So I think it's worth. And we actually have writers on our faculty that we try to connect to people for that very purpose. Right?
Yes.
Just to help with grant writing and to really help tell a story for that organization.
All right. Now I feel like we haven't listed everything and I want to discuss.
No, we certainly haven't.
I want to discuss the awards with you and I want to tell you how deeply disappointed I am that 2 years in a row I suggested the most wonderful human being in nonprofit.
It will come.
For an award and somebody else got it, who I can only assume was even better.
Well, that is exactly what happens. We have 21 judges every year. They come from nonprofit and business backgrounds from all over Berkshire County, South, Central, and North. And we are not involved. We facilitate the process by making sure everyone has their group of applications and holding the meeting and, moving it along. But we don't actually have any say in the decision. It's judges outside of our organization. And it's the same thing with grants. Applications that are well written tend to get more notice. But usually if the person who is nominated did not get selected, it's because they were up against, and this changes every year, the pool of whom they're up against changes every year. So what we always advise people, because you're not the only one certainly in that position, is to resubmit, because eventually the pool works in your favor and you are on the top. And or the judges have, they all have different levels of curiosity and interest. So it depends on so many things, and I love that because it's not rigged.
Well, I just want to say how charming and wonderful and effective a terrific woman named Teresa O'Brien, who is the president of the board for the Berkshire Waldorf School. And among other things, she, with the help of a wonderful director of services, Steve Segarin, raised $8.5 million, God love him. And every penny went into making a marvelous school in Stockbridge.
Yes, that was a big project.
And as a member, a citizen of Stockbridge, I am so grateful to have them. And she's an award winner in my book.
Yes, and that is, I mean, that's the thing. Once you start an awards program, you have to keep going because there are so many people to honor.
Yeah, and who really deserve it. And anyone who won that award in the year that I recommended Teresa did something to be awarded.
Yes.
And aren't we lucky? And
yes,
I just want to say a couple of things. This is a community of nonprofits. I worked in nonprofits all my life. And I will tell you what is at the basis of all of it, and you can hear it in the voice of this charming, charming woman. What's at the basis of all nonprofit pursuits is love. People who believe in what they're doing, love what they're doing, are committed to it because they're not doing it for the money. And it's a wonderful atmosphere, and it's terrific people like you, filled with such energy and such focus. And thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you, Carole.